All right, guys, welcome to, what is this now, Alex? Episode 4?
I think episode 4.
So, episode 4 of the Coaches Roundtable, just to make sure I get that correctly. So, obviously, same format as last week. Myself and Alex are going to go through some questions. And then, yeah, I'll go from there. So, Alex, first of all, though, how are you doing?
Oh, not bad, mate.
Yeah?
Just kind of, just chilling, really. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I've trained twice this week, and not going to lie, because I've not lifted properly for the last, obviously, I don't even know how long lockdown's been, but I'm sore. Let's just put it that way. Like I'm very
good.
tender, like a tender chicken breast.
Yeah.
Anyway, on that note,
it's been raining today, and it's made me very sad because I haven't been able to train. So
I hope you've put your rack and stuff under a tarpaulin.
Oh God, yeah, no, it lives in the shed. I only take it out.
Okay, yeah. I was stressed there. I was like, my God, she's left her Eleiko stuff out in the rain.
Oh God, no, just the thought.
Oh God.
But anyway, so first question.
Yeah, let's dig into it. I'm ready to go.
We got one from Kerry, and Kerry would like to know how to mentally prepare for her first competition.
I'm happy for you to take it away if you want to.
How to mentally prepare? I think again, there's going to be a variety. Don't say it.
Let's do the PC way.
I think there's a variety of techniques you can use. The techniques that work best for you, you're going to have to find out, like, kind of through trial and error. But obviously, I suppose for the first competition, you don't have that opportunity. I think, I'm not sure. I'm probably the worst person to ask, because for my first competition, I was absolutely bricking it.
Yeah. I think, though, you can draw valuable experience from that, though, because,
true.
you know, even if it's your first competition or if it's your 50th competition, there's still elements of, I wouldn't necessarily say fear, but there's still elements of uncertainty. And I think, like, that's almost a good thing in a way, because it makes you less reluctant in competition, where what you don't want in a competition is for your ego to drive your competitive nature.
Just get rid of ego completely.
Yeah, I think that's a slippery slope downhill. But yeah, I want to hear, I mean, even if it's not necessarily you, what sort of things would you say to lifters, you know, before they're approaching their first competition, perhaps in training, or how would you prepare them psychologically? I think is kind of the where we should go with this question.
Yeah, I think like, firstly, it's going to be nowhere near as bad as you think it's going to be. I think there's a lot of, like, you know, again, it's a kind of new experience. You're kind of preparing for the worst. You've no idea what's going to go on. And, like, you know, by and large, it's a relatively straightforward process. You know, the whole kind of competition process, I think kind of understanding the rules before you go, you know, into that kind of competition environment is key. So just kind of, like, you know, sort of understanding the rule book, getting familiar with, like, those little rules that might catch you out, stuff like press out, or like putting the barbell down before they're giving you the down signal. You know, things like that I've seen people get caught out for, but they don't understand why they've been caught out for. So that's really, really key. Obviously, you can go through to British Weightlifting, have some guidance on it. You can have a look at the IWF rules of competition. That's available on their website as well, which is, again, very, very similar to the BWL model, or like their set of rules. Also, you know, just asking your coach. It's their job to sort of know. So you can always ask them and just, you know, kind of get familiar with that.
Yeah.
I think, you know, obviously having someone handle you and look out for you is really, really useful as well. So, you know, again, just making sure that you've got, like, a coach there, or it doesn't even need to be your coach, just somebody who kind of is familiar with the competition process. So that could be like another lifter, you know, someone like that. They made a change recently. It's something that you have to have a level 2 in coaching weightlifting in order to be able to coach someone or support someone in the back room.
Yeah.
So that was a change that was recently brought in. That said, you can still sneak people in. So, you know, you didn't hear that from me, but as long as you don't make a big fuss about it, it should be fine. In case, you know, you can't find someone with a level 2, shouldn't be a problem. I had one competition that unfortunately I didn't have a coach for, and it was kind of in the middle of nowhere. So I couldn't find anyone that I knew that was going. And I was like, could somebody look after me? And they found somebody to look after me, which was, you know, a hell of a lot better than kind of going it alone. So that's probably from the more kind of admin perspective. Like if you have that sorted, it's going to make, you know, you're not going to have as much anxiety about it. It's going to make you feel a lot better and a lot more relaxed, which is again key. So, you know, do your homework, get the admin out of the way, ideally before. In terms of like mental preparation, have a plan and stick to it. So, you know, don't go in. Hey, do as I say, not as I do. So like, no, but like, you know, have an idea for what your first, second and third attempt's going to be. Have a plan for if you miss a lift, are you going to repeat it? Is it going to depend? That kind of thing. Just repeat it. It's not worth getting into you know, oh, I feel good, so I'm going to go up, and then you bomb the second one, and now you're on your third attempt, and you need to make a lift in order not to bomb out. So yeah, so kind of have, you know, go through that thought process or have that discussion with your coach ahead of time. Make sure that those numbers, like in competition generally, you want to be a bit more conservative than you might be in training. I think it's a safe bet. So, you know, again, because you get some people who thrive in that competition environment, but you don't know this yet. You might not be that kind of person. So, you know, choose numbers that like, you know, you can realistically hit. Like ideally you want to be going 6 for 6, but I think for myself, anywhere between like 4 for 6 and 6 for 6, and I'm happy. So, you know, aim for that kind of range. And just realize that, like, you know, you're not, it can sometimes feel like, you know, everyone's eyes are on you and they're all judging you, and, you know, oh, it's a big thing. And it's like, no, like you're one new person in, you know, a much bigger competition that's taking place over an entire day. And this is just one competition that's, you know, one of many throughout the year. And, you know, it's like in the grand scheme of things, it's not a big deal whether you bomb out or whether you come first, like, you know. So, you know, it's have fun with it, try and do your best, but like, I don't know, just try and approach it in a kind of like realistic way of doing it. Like,
so I'm just going to add to that, just to kind of round it off. I think you pretty much touched on all the aspects. The only thing that I would add to that and just refine to is make sure you have a plan, but don't have, if it's your first competition or your second or your third and you're new to it, don't have any expectations. Have a goal, have a plan, but don't expect to go and have your best performance or to absolutely crush your lifts. What you need to do is just have in your mind the lifts that you want to hit. Just make sure you get them on the board, stay nice and calm, because it can be quite a stressful place, which brings me on to the second thing is, if you have a coach, try and make sure your coach is available, because it makes it 10 times easier with someone who is guiding you through the process, who can select your lifts, who can tell you that looked a bit, you know, let's just go up a little more. And I just want to see you like put a bit more effort into that lift, rather than you going, yeah, that felt really good, but actually it looked like a pile of crap. I think the third thing is pre-competition. So we're kind of speaking hypothetically, as in, you know, you're at the competition or you're maybe a week out of competition. And I think one of the things that has helped me the most is the more competitions you go to, the more confident you become. And so one of the things that we run at Central London is we run benchmarks. And the thing with benchmarks is benchmarks aren't only there just to have, you know, our lifters max out. As much as it's fun to see everyone lift out, max out, not lift out. It's also a way of our lifters being under stressful conditions, without the pressure of people that they don't know watching them. And I think that's a big part of weightlifting, is you are the only one on the platform. So if you can get used to you being the only one on the platform and you performing that lift, but knowing that your coach and your friends and whoever else is there to support you rather than to, I guess, judge you, it makes a big difference to your performance on the platform. And I think that's kind of where I would probably stop my kind of summary of sorts of some of the things that you would look for in psychological preparation, at least. Yeah. Cool. All right, let's move on. That's the shortest answer I've ever given. Shortest, longest.
Let me see. Let me grab another question. Looks like Zarko has joined us. Hello, Zarko. Oh, he's been quiet.
What's up, guys?
Zarko, if you've got any questions throughout this, I guess, discussion or roundtable, just shout them out or type them in the chat, or however you want to get them across. We want to kind of generate this into a little bit more of a discussion rather than just me and Alex talking at each other for an hour.
A seminar rather than a lecture.
Sweet, but I enjoy listening to you guys.
Yeah.
Well, at least someone does.
Yeah.
I'm a one fan.
What's the second one then, Alex?
All right. I got one from Rue.
Yeah.
What kind of mentality do you think someone needs to adopt or have in order to become the best weightlifter they can be?
I think this is on a case-to-case basis. I wouldn't necessarily say that there is one fundamental... Actually, to be honest, I would probably say that there is one fundamental quality that you need to have as a weightlifter.
You got to be a little bit mental.
Yeah. But the thing is that you can kind of refine that to... You have to be mental, but also that mental kind of ability comes down to, like, you have to believe that you can get there. Because, like, let's be honest, there's probably only about 1 or 2% of weightlifters in the world that will ever make it to a world champs or an Olympic champ stage. And that's just, it is what it is. Like, that's weightlifting. It's kind of a brutal sport. And I think, I would say what's important is kind of the things that get you to be good at weightlifting in the first place, rather than just elite, which is turn up on time, give as much effort as you can, always try and trust in what your coach says, or also potentially like challenge the status quo. I know I'm kind of chucking in Apple's challenge the status quo, but it works well on all levels, because if you're only ever going to follow what one person has done to get where they want to be, that's not necessarily going to work for you. So I think what you need to do is you need to be a little bit, I wouldn't say innovative, but you need to figure out how you're going to get there, not how, they got there, so you're going to follow in their footsteps. It's a personal journey. It's not necessarily a case of, oh, X, Y, and Z have done it, so I'll just follow the steps that they go to get to where they were, because it doesn't really work like that. That's not sport. Otherwise, you'd have 50, 60, 70 weightlifters every year breaking world records, but they don't. And the simple reason is because, well, first of all, they can't, but second of all, because it doesn't work for them. It only works for individual purposes. Without going into too much detail, obviously everyone knows that an Olympic weightlifter at the Olympics or world champs has to be a little bit nuts, to be throwing that much weight over their head. But I thought I'd kind of offer a little bit more, I guess, advice to that subject.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I'll just I'll work from yours. Mentality. Again, it's such an individual thing. And like, I think it's a combination of different traits, and that combination again is going to be different, like kind of per person. In terms of like being, you know, the best weightlifter you can be, you might be the kind of person who could eventually make it to like world championships, Olympics. You might be the kind of person who, you know, just ends up competing at a local level and is quite happy with that. So it's like, so I think, you know, we've got these two kind of concepts here where it's like, it's a very individual thing, and then it's kind of based upon, you know, what the best weightlifter within, you know, just it's a personal thing. It's not like worse like, compared to everyone else, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I don't know, you know, again, it's sort of more general concepts of stuff that, you know, Connor talks about. It's like, you know, discipline, you know, turning up on time, getting through, you know, workouts even if you're not enjoying it, that kind of thing. I'd say as well, it's like that 80-20 rule once again, where it's like 80% of the results come from 20% of what you do. And so like obviously, you know, the training is really, really important, but there's also other aspects in your life that is important to kind of, you know, balance out and, you know, just make sure that they're working correctly in order to fulfill your potential. So, you know, make, again, just basic stuff, making sure that you're sleeping, you know, a good number of hours every night, that you're eating well, that you're trying to minimize stress kind of throughout your life, that you're, you know, kind of like focused on weightlifting at least as much as you can be, you know. So for example, if you're doing like 6 different sports, then that might be a little bit more difficult than if you were just doing one. So I think as well, like, you know, you got that kind of like 80-20 thing that you have to like consider what's giving me the most bang for my buck here. And but then there's also a really like just approaching things indirectly. So, you know, obviously training and, you know, going to competitions and, you know, things like that, that's a very direct approach. There's also that kind of indirect approach in that, like, you know, just learning the theory and reading up on the subject and watching videos on the subject and, you know, having discussions with other lifters and other coaches. Like you need that, you need to develop that kind of knowledge and that understanding. And that will help you, you know, just yeah. It's really, really important, almost more important than the training.
Absolutely. I think
yeah.
you kind of touched on it there as well, is you can't do it by yourself.
Yes. Yeah. 100%.
If you want to be successful, you can't, especially as a weightlifter, you can't do everything by yourself. You need to be able to have a team around you, or at least a select number of individuals who you trust, who you respect, and who you would trust to, I guess, kind of lay their lives in front of you. Because the thing is that to be the best, or even just to be successful in something, you have to sacrifice an enormous amount, whether that be, you know, Alex kind of touched on it, whether it be career wise, whether it be relationship wise, whether it be, you know, you watching one less Netflix show so you can get an extra hour of sleep. And it might seem menial, but in the long run, it adds up and it makes a big difference to your performance if you can really dial in those tiny little nuances of training, so that when you come into the gym, the program is the easiest part. You know, everything else that fits around that as a puzzle is so much harder, like the external stresses and the sleep and the nutrition, the recovery, the physio, you know, the rehab, all that sort of stuff, just to make sure that everything is ticking over. Like Alex, I think you touched on it really well there, to be honest.
I think just to add as like a kind of closer, you know, you're never gonna be able to, you know, have a perfect situation as well. Like, you know, you're never going to be able to get 8 hours of sleep a night and eat exactly, you know, the required number of macros and calories that you need, and, you know, completely eliminate stress from the rest of your life. It's not going to happen. Life doesn't work that way. So it's less about kind of, so long as the intention is there and you're working towards it, that's the most important thing. Like, you know, everything around you can be absolutely terrible, and as long as you're kind of like trying, even if it's just a little bit, like that's kind of what counts, because that's the only thing you can control, you know. So I think it's kind of, yeah, just kind of like understanding that there's always going to be things that get in the way, and don't sort of let that like demotivate you or distract you from the overall kind of goal, because everybody has that, like even if they're like world record holder, Olympic champion, doesn't matter, they're gonna have like some crap days and they're gonna have some good days, and that's just how it is. So
yeah, cool.
All right, grab another question. I had a question.
Oh, go on.
How do you know when you've fulfilled your potential in weightlifting?
I mean, it's kind of I think that's kind of a personal thing, in terms of, like, someone could tell you your goal, but at the end of the day, it really comes down to how much you want to achieve. And what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, you want to become Olympic champion and you've set yourself that goal. You probably won't feel successful until you have achieved that. Yeah. Whereas, for example, if your goal was, well, I'd like to get to the Olympics, but my main goal is just to do as well as I can every day, every year for the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and try and make a career out of it, then that's the kind of thing that you're seeking, rather than having some kind of objective quality to focus on. You're more just focused on the process rather than actually what the outcome becomes. I think that's kind of the way that I would summarize it. I don't know whether you're able to quantify it any further, because, like I said, it's a very personal question, in terms of everybody feels successful. Everybody feels like they've made it at different points in their weightlifting. I'm going to go with career, because, you take a lot of time lifting. If you're lifting 5 days a week and it takes you 1 to 2 hours, that's 10 hours a week, which is almost like a part-time job. So essentially, is like, it could become a career if you're lifting 10 hours a week for 10, 15, maybe even 20 years. That's a lot of hours that you've accrued doing something that you are hopefully passionate about. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to let you take over on kind of the things that I've just touched on, because, like I said, I would say, personally, for me, my main goal was never to be a successful weightlifter, as it was to make sure that I understood what weightlifting required of an athlete, and then to be able to transfer that into a coach role, so that I can ensure that whoever I coach is better than me, is my goal. Because if I can't make someone better than me, and I'm not talking about numbers, I'm talking about satisfaction, and I'm talking about, the process where, obviously, I haven't made it to a British champs or a English champs or Commonwealth or whatever it might be. Hopefully some of my lifters will. That's kind of my goal, but it's up to them to be able to set that standard. I think, anyway, that's my personal opinion, but I'm happy to hear what you want to say on it.
I've got to answer my own question now. Oh, God. The whole reason I answered is because I don't have an answer.
Hold on, let me get my notes.
Yeah. Oh shit. Oh God. I thought this was going to be a one-way street, but God.
I mean, what do you think about my answer? Because, obviously, like I said, it's a very personal thing.
Yeah.
And
I think it's, no, 100%. And I think, potential, if we define potential as like, your kind of theoretical, the best position you could be in theoretically. Again, it's very much going to depend on, like, the sort of people around you and the environment you're in. You can only go so far by yourself. Like, you get a good coach or a good team, it's going to push you, a lot further. I think as well, like, knowing what your potential is, kind of being, that's really hard to say, especially when you're a beginner.
Yeah.
But kind of like sometimes you might just know, maybe you don't, and it will take a couple of years for you to figure out. But again, just kind of like being realistic with yourself. And it's like, look, you might have the potential to go to like international competition, but again, maybe you just don't want to. Maybe you don't want that kind of drama in your life. Like, that's okay. I think the aim of the game is to kind of achieve the goals you set out for yourself. So long as they fall within the scope of your potential. So like, there's no point saying, I want to go to the World Championships if there's no chance in hell you're ever going to go to the World Championships and you know it. But, you know, that said, I don't know. I think, you know, that might be really difficult if you're a 60-something-year-old who's only been, you know, lifting for a year or two. World Championships might be hard. But like, you know, maybe if you're younger, that's a bit more realistic. Maybe it's not. I don't know. So again, like, you know, kind of having a sort of sit down with yourself and trying to figure out, like, what could I potentially do if the stars were to align and I was to be in the best position possible, and also, like, what do I kind of want to get out of this sport? You know, yeah, again, it's just kind of sitting down with yourself and your coach and the people around you and just trying to figure out the answers to those two questions. And yeah.
I think as well, Zaka, I just noticed you muted your mic. So if you want to say something, we can quickly come back to you in a second. But what I also wanted to add to that as well was, Alex, you kind of touched on setting expectations for yourself. And I think what's also important as a coach is it's not necessarily to always be in the corner of that athlete. As much as that is the case, you know, you're putting the towel on their shoulders, you're putting the chair under their arse so they can sit down and rest, and whatever it might be, whatever analogy you want to use. But you've also got to remember that if you want to be a good coach, you have to push that athlete in whatever direction they want to go in. Mm-hmm. And so what I mean by that is, don't just be a sideline coach. Don't just expect someone to come to you and get better. Like, they will get better, but you also have to understand that if you want to be a good coach, if you want to be the best coach, you have to push that athlete so you can see their potential, because they might not realize it, but you might see it, you know, because sometimes that athlete might be sandbagging things and they might think like, oh, I'm never going to make it. But even by you saying, I think you could snatch at least 140 this year, that in their minds gives them positivity because someone believes in them. And I think as a coach, it's really powerful to an athlete that someone who has so much kind of, you know, say in your daily life, because they program for you and they mentor you and whatever it is, I think it means a lot coming from someone who isn't, you know, blood bound or family bound, or even if they're not a friend, they're just your coach, you know, whatever. And I think the last thing that I'll say before if Shaka wants to jump in is, you have to understand that what you put in is what you get out. If you want to be good, you have to be willing to sacrifice and put in a massive amount of work to achieve the goals that you want to achieve. Yeah. Regardless of what it is.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I have a kind of phrase, and it's very tongue in cheek, but it's like, if there's not blood on the bar, you haven't worked hard enough. Yeah. In that, like, you know, you've got to be willing to sacrifice and to give stuff up and to, like, put yourself through pain basically in order to get something that's, you know, worth it. Yeah. And just to like build on your point, do you remember once we'd come out of London Bridge and we would, you know, the little Cafe Nero next door?
Yeah.
And we this was really, really early in my kind of lifting career. And Connor had been coaching me for a little while, probably a couple of months or something. We had a very sort of important conversation where he was, you know, again, I'll keep the details a secret. Maybe we'll discuss that in a later conversation. But it was essentially saying, look, I think that you could get to this level. I believe in you, and I want to see you do it. And it was like, you know, for me, that was shit. Okay, because it's one thing to say it yourself, but you don't really believe it. But when somebody else does. Yeah. And they're being genuine and serious, it can have like a real impact on you. And so, yeah, I'll never forget that. And I think, like, as a coach, you know, if you see somebody with potential that they don't understand or that they don't know of, I think one of the best things you can do is just, you know, kind of help them realize that. So
even if it comes down to someone who doesn't have, who doesn't think that they've got potential, or who potentially doesn't look like they have potential, even instilling that belief into them might make them be like, oh yeah, I can do this. Because we've had plenty of people down at the club who they'll be coming for weeks and they keep saying, I'm not getting any better, like I don't think this is for me. And then for you to just say like something really short and sharp, like, well, sometimes you have to be able to work hard, like for what you want. We're not just going to hand it to you on a silver platter. I can see the potential in you, but you haven't realized that yet. Even if they are nowhere near what their potential could be, and they never might be. I think it's still important to instill that belief into any kind of athlete, regardless of what you think their potential is or not, whether it's Olympic standard, whether it's just a national or even just a local competition, because not everyone wants to be a national lifter. No one cares. Like, some people don't even care enough to be a national lifter, which is absolutely fine. But you as a coach still want to push them, because you want to see what they can do, because it makes you proud when they stand onto a platform, they snatch, or however many number it is, it doesn't even matter. It's the fact that they've snatched a number in front of a crowd, or they've snatched a PB, or the look on their face and the feeling of elation after they come off the platform, or that's kind of the things that kind of excites me in coaching. Anyway, obviously we were going to go to Zarko. Zarko, you unmuted your mic. So did you want to add anything to the topic, or did you want to ask us a question or anything?
No, I just I agree with everything you guys are saying, and thank you for that. Like, it's a really good insight. But I think you guys, especially Alex, have touched on what I wanted to ask, and that was, as a beginner, how do I know what my potential is?
Yeah.
And like, does that take sitting down and speaking to a coach? Does it take sitting down and speaking to an athlete or other members of the club? Or is there not just one way to do it? Is there like various ways that as a beginner I can go about like kind of realizing what my potential might be? And like, how does that affect my goal setting?
I think, like many things, get many opinions if you can from people that know you very well and who kind of live with you. That might take time, like as your network kind of builds, but kind of getting an idea of like, because again, you can have your personal assessment, and that's really, really useful. And then you can have assessments from other people as well, which some might be more positive, some might be more negative, completely depends. But from that, you can kind of start to build a picture of like, oh, okay, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? How do they compare to other people? And as a result, where could I potentially go with this thing? So, again, that might be, sitting down with your coach, might be sitting down with your teammates, might be sitting down with, people in other walks of life or other sports or, completely unrelated areas. Because again, so much of success in this sport is not just like, well, how much can you lift? Yeah, it's part of it, but it's like, what are your kind of character traits? How do you approach problems in your life? How do you solve them? How do you deal with other people? How do you get through difficulty? It's like, it's so many things that it's useful to get a number of different perspectives on. And I think from that you can start to build a kind of just an idea of where you could potentially go with this thing. And I'd say for a beginner, again, learn as much as you can, understand where you kind of fit in this hierarchy. There's obviously a big difference between like national level competitions and Europeans and then worlds and then Olympics and so on. So kind of understanding the differences between all of those and what it might take to get to each level. I don't know. Sorry, it's a very fluffy answer.
No, I mean I think, to be honest, you touched on it well before the question was asked, in the respect that I think belief as a beginner doesn't necessarily just come from yourself, because you don't have, as a beginner, it's hard to have expectations because you've never done that. You've never done it before. Like when you're a kid, the first time you learn to ride a bike, your expectation is so low because you've never ever ridden a bike before. So you fall off like 50, 60, 70 times, however times it might be, but your mum and dad or your brother are always there to like pick you up, put you on the bike and go, come on, one more try and you can do it. And I think that's the kind of point I make, is that if you imagine that that little kid on the bike is you, and rather than it being your mum or your dad or your brother, it's your coach, or it's someone who believes in you, who confides in you as a beginner, but also as an advanced lifter, is really important to have a relationship in that respect, where you have the utmost respect and trust in someone. And when someone says to you as a beginner, I believe that you can do this, I think you're ready to compete, you know, even if you feel like you're not, that's that kind of feeling of belief from someone who, you know, you don't see every day, and like I said, is not your blood. It makes a profound effect on your psychological performance, or at least your mentality towards weightlifting, even if you don't feel it yourself. Yeah.
Sweet. Thanks, guys.
No worries.
Thank you.
Hopefully that helped.
All
All right.
Another question?
Yeah, let's go for another one. We're in a roll.
We just pull them up. Got another one from Kerry. Advice for a lifter who goes through phases of lacking motivation.
Suck it up, Buttercup. I mean, I think I'd be lying if there were times that I lacked motivation, or that I've seen athletes or lifters lack motivation in specific parts of their program, or specific parts of the year, or even just, you know, sometimes I've known people who have lacked motivation for weeks on end. And I think it can come down to a couple of factors, but I think kind of the way that I'm going to approach this is more, I guess, from like a psychological standpoint. And I guess it kind of comes down to the whole, you know, realizing your potential, that, you know, things will be hard. They're not always going to be easy. And I think usually when things are hard, you lack motivation more. I've known people who, when things get hard, their motivation increases. But I think by and large, when things get hard, or when things get difficult, or when you're experiencing some kind of plateau or whatever it might be in weightlifting, you know, your motivation wavers, because like it's only natural, isn't it? You know, as humans, the way that we've got to the top of the food chain is to always continually progress, to always be the best, you know. And I think it makes a big difference when you're enjoying a program, because you then don't lack motivation. You enjoy something, you're doing it for fun. But I think that's the process behind it. You know, if I always said to Alex, I always gave her an objective measure of, after this cycle, you're going to hit this number. And if that's in the back of her head, that's the only thing she's going to think. But if I just said to her, let's just work on these bits, and then in maybe 4 or 6 weeks, let's just see where you're at with numbers, there you've taken it away from the outcome. You've focused on the process to get to that outcome. And I think that's kind of a long-winded answer to say that motivation will waver, just like strength, just like anything. But I think what definitely helps is environment. Having people around you who can give you a kick up the arse if you don't feel great, you know, like your coach or your friends or your training partner, even your mum and dad, or if you've got a sibling, those kind of things can really help. But also I think as well, training will be hard, but it doesn't always have to be monotonous. It doesn't always have to be a slog. I think trying to make it fun and trying to make it interesting, and as well as also focusing on actually getting better, because we can't all do the things that we enjoy because it's not going to make us better. Let's be honest. But to be able to focus, what's that?
So it's like that balance, isn't it, between, you can't just do stuff you enjoy, or you're not really going to improve as much. You still got to work on those weak points.
Yeah.
But again, if you're just working on the really hard stuff and, getting stapled every session, you're going to run out of steam really, really quickly. So it's kind of like trying to find that balance between, things that like you kind of enjoy and that keep sessions fresh, and then also working on those hard parts. But I just wanted to add that in.
Yeah. Z, you unmuted your mic.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that what you guys said, I was like hitting the nail on the head. And I think just to add on, in my experience, is just going through the motions no matter what. So like just not giving up, because you've chosen to do this for whatever reason. And if on some days, and like you said quite rightly, that you get days where you feel really low with motivation and you don't want to do it, but you've got to just do it without sounding too cliche. I think at least in my experience, if I wasn't feeling it one day and I would just take a day off, then that feeling would kind of grow, and then I would feel even more less motivated the next day and the day after that.
Yeah.
And I think just going through the motions and like accepting the situation, also realizing that you do have a choice and you've chosen to do this. So like you should just do it and just don't give up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think it's a valid point. And I think to kind of round that point off as well is, it's definitely, I think motivation is very much a case by case basis, because I've known people who have never lacked motivation in whatever. I don't know how they do it, and I don't know the secret to their motivation, whatever it might be. But, I think some people, they might lack motivation to do that session in the week. But I think sometimes that's needed, that they need to take a day off so that they can actually realize how much they miss weightlifting, or, psychologically they can actually recover from the session previous or from the week previous, because you've got to also realize that, like, if you want to continue to get better, training will always be hard. It will never be easy. Because if it was easy, you wouldn't get any better. And I think sometimes it comes the case of, it's a fine balance between, sometimes you have to know when to push, but sometimes you have to know when to come off the gas and just say, okay, I need a day or two just to recover, get my sleep back in order, make sure I'm eating, and then I can go and hit it hard. And I think that also comes to discipline, is that you have to say to yourself, if I'm going to take that 1 or 2 days off, I have to make sure that after those 1 or 2 days off, I am going to come back and I'm going to hit it hard.
Yeah, I think, I just wanted to add kind of onto that as well. Like, it's super important. Sometimes if you are feeling demotivated, it can be because, the program that you're on or the work that you're doing is just got to a point where it's too much, and you've accumulated so much fatigue,
absolutely,
either physically or mentally or both, that something has to give. And I think recognizing when that is the case it definitely takes a little bit of time to learn. But once you do, it's again very, very useful. Again, try and be honest with yourself, have that but also, like, to jump on, to play devil's advocate, I think a lot of people say, oh, I've had a really tough week and I think, I'm not feeling it today, I must be fatigued. And it's like, what drives me mad is that you see like a lot of national level lifters do this, and it's like, oh, not quite feeling 100%, so I've just decided to put my feet up and run a hot bubble bath, and I'm just going to sit there with a glass of wine and my fucking book, and you think the Chinese team are doing that? No. they're turning up. They might not do like exactly the same session as they had planned, but they're going to do some work, even if it's just doing it like a little bit more lightly. So it's like, just don't make excuses for yourself to go and run a hot bath. That's all I'm saying.
The thing as well, though, that you touched on as well, is you actually made the point of they'll still come in and they might move lightly. And I think the point of that is it's auto-regulated. Although the Chinese are arguably one of the best weightlifting teams in the world, they might, like, what you don't see is that they aren't always lifting heavy. And I think it comes to the point where people have to realize that, you know, your body, it's a give and take. If you're going to train hard one day, don't expect to come in the next day and do exactly the same as you did the day before, you know. And like, even if you are an elite level athlete or part of the Chinese weightlifting team or whatever, you'll still see them come in. But I think what's important in elite settings is that they've learned over time how to actually auto-regulate their training so that, you know, if they're feeling fatigued, they'll just push the session to the next day and then they'll have a light day. Yeah. And there's no problem in doing that. Like, what's the rush? There's no race. You know, if it's a 6-week block, you're still going to finish it in 6 weeks. It just means that you might have to juggle sessions around, or you might have to, you know, because of life, you might have to do clean and jerks on a Tuesday followed by heavy squats on a Monday, and it feels like crap, but you've had to do that because of life, you know. But the next week, realize that you made that mistake and change the plan so that you can, I guess, mitigate the effect of those heavy squats on the clean and jerks the day after, or whatever it might be. You know, I think like context in this point is key. And auto-regulation, I think, is definitely your friend. Is if you have a program that your coach has written you, or you've written yourself, or that you're following, you don't have to, and I know this is going to sound super controversial, but you don't, nothing has to be done absolutely to the letter. You know, if you, as long as you're getting 5 days of solid quality work in, or 4 or 3 days of solid quality work in, and you're hitting the things that you need to work on, and your coach knows that, and you know that, you will get better. You know, sometimes you have to learn to push. Sometimes you have to learn to step off. Yeah.
I was going to say on like the auto-regulation and kind of being honest with yourself and that kind of thing. You know, if you're, essentially it's asking the question, like, how do I get the most out of this day? So, you know, if you're not feeling great, but you push yourself really, really hard in the gym, that might be a net negative. But if you're not feeling great and, you know, you push yourself a little bit in the gym, maybe you do some technique work or accessories, that kind of thing, that might be a net positive, even if it's just a small net positive compared to, like, you know, a bigger day when you might get a little bit more out of it. So it's like, you know, again, how do I get the most out of this day, out of this training session, out of this week, month, year, whatever? And that will kind of help you answer that question about kind of auto-regulation. And what should I be doing? Should I go easy? You know, should I go a little bit lighter? Should I go heavier? That kind of thing. So yeah,
absolutely. Cool.
All right.
We've got time for one more.
I think so. I think we might have just gone through all of the questions.
Oh, have we?
What's 9 plus 10?
19.
Hold on, let me get my calculator.
Did you say 9 plus 10?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, GCSE maths coming in clutch.
There you go.
21.
Do you two, either Zarko or Prince, have a question?
Yeah, actually I do. So when it comes to competing in competitions or whatnot, there's obviously the weight classes. So, and for some people, they obviously are on the border of weight classes, and others, they're like in the middle, so they don't really need to worry about it. So my question is, when should you start considering increasing your body weight from weight classes or decreasing it?
That is a really, really good question.
It is a good question, because I don't think it's something that people give a lot of thought to, if I'm honest. I am always an advocate, if I quickly jump in before you go. For me, not me personally, but for me, like as a coach, I would always try and ensure that the athlete is prepared nutritionally before their competitions. And what I mean by that is, I would prefer someone to go up a weight class than to go down a weight class. And there's been a couple of lifters that I've coached in the past, you know, even recently, that they've had to cut weight, and you can see the effect that it has on their even just their psychological state to attempting weights or like their warm-ups, and they look sluggish and slow. And I think kind of just to split it into two halves, first of all, I'm an advocate for always trying to stay around your weight class when you're close to competition. If you're out of competition, I think it's important to just relax your nutrition slightly, just so that if you have a hard training program, you have to realize that you're going to have to take on more nutritional value, because you're going to have to recover somehow. You know, sleep does a lot for you, but sleep doesn't give you glycogen. Carbohydrates give you glycogen. Protein repairs the muscle. If you're not eating at all, but you're sleeping 10 hours a night, it's still not going to help, you know? So in hard kind of training cycles, you're probably going to need to eat a little bit more, being at, I guess, a slight caloric surplus. And I think, to be honest, I'm more of an advocate of that. Now, if I kind of attack it from the separate side, in terms of when you should cut weight, I definitely think that it's important as a weightlifter for at least the first 2 to 3 years to make sure that you're not fluctuating weight. What I mean by that is you're not increasing weight and you're then not drastically decreasing weight. I think what's important is to have a weight class in mind for your frame, and to gradually work up to that weight class. Obviously, this is speaking hypothetically for someone who is, say, 60 kilos and they want to get up to, say, 75, a la Alex Cave. But, you know, there's people who potentially weigh, let's say, in excess of 100 kilos, but they want to come down. And I think my point to that is, as a beginner lifter, it's not something that you should potentially worry about too much. The one thing that you need to worry about more is lifting as much as you can, eating well, sleeping well. I think when it comes past those points, it should always be done gradually. Don't just cut weight straight away. If you know you've got a competition in 16 weeks, don't wait until the last 2 weeks and do a stupid water cut, because it's not going to help you. You know, if you're losing 2 kilos every week for 16 weeks and you need to lose 4 kilos, well, that will be fine, won't it? You know, quick maths. But ish, it's 0.2 kilos ish, right? Like, it's one of the things that really frustrates me. And the thing is I've had people argue with me in the past, like saying I can't cut weight. I don't think people realize this, but for the people that know me personally, they know that the only thing that I love doing more than weightlifting is eating. And I've in the past been 92 kilos and I've had to come down to 85. And I've realized that in 12 weeks, and I've gone, well, instead of being, you know, gluttonous for 8 weeks, what I'm going to do is just reduce my calories by, say, 200, see if that works. If it doesn't work, reduce it a little bit more. And I take kind of like the minimal dose effect, where like try and do as little as you can for the most amount of gain, i.e. losing, gaining. But to summarize, I would always say, don't worry about it as a beginner. As an advanced lifter, if it's something that you're worried about, it's something to discuss with your coach on a case-to-case basis. But I'd always say I'm more of an advocate of going up a weight class rather than down, because I think generally it's a lot harder to lose weight, maintain strength, than it is to gain weight and gain strength. Yeah.
Not fair.
That's
I'm not sure if there's much I can kind of add to that. I think again, beginners, like, don't worry about it too much. I think especially for your first year, you're going to be, you know, the main things that are going to give you that is going to give you like a kind of bigger total is going to be like technique work and just general strength work. Again, technique work being kind of the biggest thing. You know, so that takes a while to learn. Once you kind of become more, and you know, in the first year you probably won't be competing anyway, and so it's not really that much of a kind of issue. You might be competing towards the end of the year. Again, depends on kind of how you get into the sport, if it's just on an individual basis or if you just join a club straight up.
Yep.
But you know, so again, it's something that becomes more and more important as your kind of career in the sport lengthens, and once you know the kind of level that you're at, like obviously, you know, the higher the level, the more it's going to be important because you need every advantage you can get. But I think as well, like, you know, just putting on muscle takes time, and it takes effort, and it takes money as well. You got to, you know, the amount of food you got to get through is ridiculous. And it can't just be like, you know, fast food either. It's got to be like decent food. There's relative, you know, cheaper ways of doing it, but you know, your shopping bill is still going to go up at the end of the week. And but again, like, you know, even kind of for competition, regarding like cutting and, you know, putting on weight for competition or losing weight for competition, you know, again, like the weight classes are spread out that, you know, it really doesn't make that much of a difference. Like, oh, I'm between 71 and 76. What do I do? And it's like, well, you know, wherever you're most comfortable at, like, who cares? It's just a local competition. It's just like, you know, it's not the end of the world. So
not necessarily something that you need to worry about until you get into, say, like qualification locals to get to nationals, or qualification nationals to get to internationals. And to be honest, as a beginner, you don't need to worry about that, because that's not something that is, it's not necessarily something that is the aim. You know, you might get there in a year, which is fantastic, but you have to realize that you're still a beginner. There's still a lot to learn. And I think, Alex, you touched on it really well, is that I think the more experience, the more advanced you get, the more the more you have to consider those kind of things if you want to be very successful. It's not always the best thing to do to cut weight. It might also not be the best thing to gain weight. You have to find a balance, I think. Because if I could, I'd go up to 109, but I don't want to be, because I'd be slow and heavy. Some people might suit 109, but I don't think I will. But we'll wait and see after lockdown.
I'm going to keep kicking. I've been on your case for that for ages. But for people who haven't met him, is a very tall boy, and he's currently like, you know, 85 is not. Well,
no, I'm not 85. Come on, Alex.
Oh, okay, you said you came down to 85. I don't know.
I was 85. I was 85.
Fair enough.
Let's be honest now. I'm probably at least 10 kilos heavier than that.
Yeah, that's probably good though. Maintain your gains.
I mean, yeah, let's go with that.
Like, yeah, I don't know. I forget the original point, but yeah, I think there's, so like based on height, there are certain, like, you know, for a given height, there's a sort of like ideal weight class that you should be in. But again, you know, this is going to vary very much on, you know, your own kind of like body composition, you know, the kind of standard that you're at. It can be used as a guide, but shouldn't really be used as a prescription. You know, you take, for example, like Matty Rogers, for example, like, you know, she's about the same height as me, and probably, you know, I should be in like 87 easily, but she's been quite comfortable at like 71, 76 for a number of years. And you know what, like, she's got a number of medals under her belt, so it seems to be working for her. So, you know, and again, she only went up to 87 at the moment, because, you know, basically just to help her qualify for the Olympics, not because she actually really wanted to be there. And so, yeah, again, like, there is an ideal, but whether it suits you is a kind of very personal thing. And I think as well, as a beginner, that, you know, the question of like, oh, I need to put on weight or, you know, get stronger, like, it kind of takes care of itself. Like, naturally you're doing, you know, these kind of movements, and your body will respond to that by putting on muscle. And so, you know, you'll definitely get a boost at the start, so long as you're like eating well, recovering all right. You know, you don't even need to be eating well. It's like, if you started from nothing, like, you know, you're going to improve anyway. But yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I've got nothing to add to that. I think that was a good question as well. So I think what we'll do then is wrap it up there, if that's all right with you, Alex.
That works for me.
Yeah. Does anyone have any more questions before we wrap it up?
I'd just like to say thank you
No worries, bro.
Thank you as well.
Yeah, no worries, guys.
Thanks for joining us, guys.
But yeah, thank you for joining us. So, kind of the same format as last week. I will do my best to. I mean, I don't really edit this. Let's be honest. I just chop a few things off and chuck it on YouTube. But you know, so what I'll do is I will pop this on the YouTube channel, and then it will also be up on our social media next week or something. So yeah, thanks for, if you're watching at a later stage, thanks for tuning into our YouTube channel wherever you're watching this, and the guys that tuned in live, thank you very much for coming, and we shall see you next week.